Hello and a very warm welcome to a special episode of ET Studios, ETHRWorld and CFA Institute. I'm Devina Lason and today we explore bridging the talent gap in finance, strategies for the future. Now, India's financial ecosystem is evolving rapidly, driven by advancements in AI, blockchain and changing regulations. As the fintech sector soars at a CAGR of 22% from 21 to 2025, the demand for skills professionals in fintech, ESG and risk management is higher than ever. Yet the talent shortage in key areas is in fact very persistent. So join us as we explore strategies to bridge this gap via regulators and industry at large, through certifications, lifelong learning and industry-academia collaboration, all while highlighting the critical role of skills in building a future-ready finance workforce. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our very esteemed panelists today. We have joining us Sonal Singh, Head of Talent Acquisition, Deutsche Bank, India; Arpita Pamnani, Director, Head of Campus Recruitment, Axis Bank Limited; and Chris Wiese, Managing Director, CFA Institute. Right, a very warm welcome to all of you panelists. It's such a pleasure to have you here on ET Studios. Thank you for joining today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, we're ready to deep dive right into a really fascinating topic, which is bridging the gap in the finance sector when it comes to talent, and of course, keeping in mind all the future requirements that the industry and the markets do hold across sectors, but very much in the finance field. So Sonal, maybe let's kickstart with you. In your observation, in your experience with this rapidly growing NBFC sector, fintech, banking, there is of course such a demand for the right talent. What does it take for organizations to meet that demand? How do organizations adapt to ensure they're getting the best talent through the door? And are there any specific skills which are most in demand at the moment?
Thank you so much. I think it's a very interesting question to begin the discussion today. And organizations, if you look at in the last few years, they really had to reincarnate themselves.
Yes.
They had to think through what is it that they are offering employees, apart from just the monetary benefits, which is what the banking industry in particular was really well known for. Now organizations had to take a look inside and redefine what is the value proposition that they are bringing to their employees.
Sure.
And that value proposition in today's day and age is trying to cover aspects like mental well-being.
Yes.
It is looking at diversity and inclusion as important pillars on what is it that they are able to provide the employees. There are various employee resource groups that are there in the organization, and organizations want to go and make sure that they are also talking and letting the prospective employees know about this. So I think they really had to reflect and make sure they are redefining the EVPs. A lot of employee branding efforts are in that particular direction. Now, if you talk particularly about the skills, when it comes to banking, I think the traditional roles still are there and they are en masse. So I don't want to talk much about those because everyone knows that pretty well. But some of the ones that have newly come up and which I see are now a lot in demand, they are around the transformation roles.
Wow,
so data engineers, solution engineers. I think the demand for those have risen before. At a point of time, let's say about 8 years back, organizations didn't even have those teams.
Sure.
But now that's an important requirement. How do you keep pace with the changing market scenarios and transform yourself as an organization?
Absolutely.
Then we also have a lot of emphasis on analytics. So skills like, for example, Python is not just most sought after, but also extremely well paid.
Yes.
So those skills have become extremely important for us. I think those are some of the things that are now taking shape and becoming important in terms of skills. And the last one that I do wish to talk about is around the data scientists. So, qualitative strategists, I think those are also extremely in demand. ESG is emerging as a new area. So a lot of emphasis that organizations are putting in that particular function as well. So these are some latest ones and pretty interesting ones that are coming up the curve.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's really fascinating. And surely there's also been this big evolution ever since COVID, ever since the pandemic. As you mentioned, organizations also looking at aspects like mental health and how to groom the candidate, the professional holistically. We'll get a lot more into all these details. Thank you for that. Before that, Arpita, let's get you in on this. Again, in your experience, what are some of the skills that are very much in demand? But more than that, how can the finance sector really look at attracting and retaining the best of the talent out there?
I think like Sonal mentioned, there are two kinds of organizations in the financial sector. One is where, the numbers are in mass, and the other one is where you have a specific, smaller set of numbers, but then there are specific skills that are required. But even in the mass hiring organizations also, there are certain roles where specific skills are required, and certain roles where, a more generic set of skills are required. So the treatment of both are very, very different. When it comes to specific skill sets, having a certification or having something over and above your generic skill really helps, and that's where the whole salary part comes in. When it comes to a higher CTC, we are looking for people where apart from just their generic skills, they also have something specific to bring onto the table. And then when it comes to mass hiring, when it comes to like a broader range of hiring, that's where a lot of graduates are hired, but then they are also trained by the organizations like bigger organizations like ours, where we would have these tailor-made courses which are an industry and academia collaboration, which are tailor-made according to the industry. So you will have a certification maybe, but that certification will give the organization a lot of benefits. So what happens is in a lot of cases we also promise a job before you start the certification. Of course, on your completing the certification is when you get the job, but that's also how we have started hiring. But the extra edge of a skill over your generic studies has definitely been helpful.
Interesting. And are there any specific skills, again, that you perceive that you're observing as most in demand at the moment?
So like Sonal was mentioning about IT, apart from just the big data, the Python and, the data analytics field, which, all of a sudden, no bank had a data analytics team. And now it has, such a huge team. Same thing with IT. IT was just a support function. Now it's such a major function with us because apart from the physical banking that's there, the internet banking is a huge space for us. But similar to that, what has grown right now is, say, for example, something very niche, but something very important like cybersecurity. Because of the level of IT usage, the risks have become very, very high, and that's a field where which is very, very specific. It's very hard to get resources in that field, especially with a specific knowledge of that. And that's a field where you can't hire somebody and then train, because you want that person to perform from day one, and you don't hire a lot of numbers there. So that's one of the fields. Again, AI is going to really, really grow. Every day there is a new AI bot coming in, and it's evolving. I won't say that it's in its final stages, but for it to evolve, you need people to work on it. And that's where the innovation is something that AI is not going to bring in. It's the people.
Absolutely.
And people with that skill set means there will be innovation in AI. So that's again another field that's going to grow. In financial sector specifically, be it a CFA course or a lot of CA institutes are also trying to evolve and bring in something more than just the studies they have done. Even CFA institutes, for that matter, what I get to know is they are trying to add things which are relevant currently in the industry. I think that really helps. In the last 4-5 years, what I've seen is a lot of these academic programs have evolved according to the industry. A lot of academicians are talking to us, asking us what we want, and then trying to change the course according to the requirement of today. I think that's really, really important.
Yes, absolutely. That customized, catered qualification based on the organization needs. Wonderful. Chris, this is a great time to get you in. You come from a very different perspective and vantage point, of course, working with CFAs, working with organizations actually across the globe. So what does it take in your experience for the finance sector to really be ahead of the curve and really be, competing for the best of the talent out there?
I think when I think about this generally and from a global perspective, it touches on a lot of what we've already mentioned. Right now, some of the themes that we see are one around technology and generative AI and Python coding, cybersecurity, almost a given. But going beyond just how do I use technology, it's how do I understand what it's doing and apply the proper judgment and critical thinking to how those tools get applied. Secondly, ethics remains a perennial topic. And again, with ethics, I think everyone wants to be ethics, but having a strong underpinning so that they avoid slipping into ethical issues that don't look so bad at the beginning, but can get you into trouble. And then a third major theme is sustainability and being able to judge the company's plans and their net zero plans and really critically evaluate whether or not they are increasing the risk of their organization. Right? And then the last thing I'll say is that there has been a strong trend toward desk-ready skills and the ability not just to understand what or conceptually what they need to know, but then to be able to apply it right away on the job.
Absolutely. Those are the very clear categorizations. From a global perspective, what would you say are some of the skill sets you're observing as particularly in demand in the finance space?
There's tremendous demand for generative AI and machine learning and really data science in general. I see that, and then I think also sustainability. We launched an ESG and more recently a climate-based program, and both of them I think our candidates are having a hard time getting enough just because there's such emphasis on that in the industry right now.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sonal, let's get you in on this. I mean, of course, talking about emerging tech and AI is the order of the day, really. How do finance professionals keep up with these evolving changes? And also, is the role of a finance professional changing too with the emergence of AI, blockchain? I mean, you name the emerging tech. We are living in the era of it. So is it really changing the role of the finance professional? And how do you keep up with these changes?
The role has changed drastically, I would say, and that's because the advent of AI, machine learning, blockchain, all of it has led to so much data that is now available. I mean, and your ability to be able to analyze it has grown manyfolds. Now, what kind of data? Let's talk about it. So when it comes to banking, I mean, a lot of data on transactions that is able to show to you, what kind of a customer experience someone is having, what is the kind of client behavior that you're able to foresee. So I think a lot of emphasis and possibilities that now exist on your ability to be able to analyze that particular data. And that has now become possible with all of these advancements that have come in. The other part is that, even if you look at it functionally, within each and every function in the organization now, be it investment banking, so, you are able to look at, the right allocation of resources, you're able to do a far better financing, you're able to do a far better credit risk undertaking. I mean, all of those things are now far more easier or rather data driven than they were in the past. So all of that has drastically changed. In terms of, what is it that finance professionals should be doing? I feel that there is a need to now look at a lot of risk and control governance related frameworks to be strengthened, because with so much data and so much ability to be able to analyze those, there needs to be a very strong governance in place, and rules around those, or in fact, whatever role you play in the organization, your ability to be able to understand all of that and embed it as you go ahead is going to be extremely important. So that is one thing that, a risk or any professionals in finance have to take in mind as they progress along and learn new skills. Definitely, I would say that they have to keep pace. They have to make sure that, whatever new skills that are coming up. Now, there is one aspect which can be around self-tutoring themselves. So you go and there is so much available on the internet itself where you can make sure that you are reskilling yourself or upskilling yourself. Then make sure that in organizations, if there are any projects, if there are any initiatives that can help you get an exposure to things that you have never worked on before, you are raising your hand. So I think those things finance professionals will have to keep in mind. But otherwise, I feel that there are a lot of professional bodies that do offer courses to keep pace with these changing advancements. And I think there is a lot of need to make sure that finance professionals are themselves taking the initiative and going for those.
Yes. Actively participating in all the reskilling, upskilling programs. And, to take that forward, Arpita, would you say there are any specific certifications that are really sought after right now in the market when it comes to exactly what Sonal has described, finance professionals taking that initiative, gearing themselves up for the new market, the new place that we're all working in? What kind of certification processes are the ones that are being considered as really desirable these days?
I'll maybe answer it in a more generic way, because it's good for an audience where they are kind of in the learning phase. Like Sonal was saying about these certifications and all, in IT industry, the trend is that you keep on learning. So they have the tendency of doing new certifications, understanding new programming language, because they know that they are not going to remain relevant. Compared to that, in the banking industry, or in the broader BFSI sector for that matter, the need of getting onto these courses and doing all of them has not really been a trend. What has changed is the fact that when we talk about Gen AI, or when we talk about data analytics, is it really limited to the IT or the data department? No. When it comes to HR too, I'm also working on a lot of tools which is going to bring in the AI to us and help us out. We are always, when it comes to any initiative that we want to take in HR, it's always about data. What is the data showing? Is there an ROI to whatever we are doing? So we have, everybody, all departments have kind of evolved into needing these skill sets. But what has got kind of come in tandem with that, especially with COVID coming in, is programs like Coursera, programs like LinkedIn, and all of that, where you have so much of data available for learning, and these are all free data. Right. Along with that, of course, all the organizations are also understanding that you can't, all of a sudden you have 500 people who are doing a certain job. You can't ask them to leave and then bring in 500 more people, which means your upskilling is a requirement. So that upskilling, the organizations are also doing the upskilling because it's their own need. We were discussing before, does drainage happen because of that? Yes, definitely. But drainage would have happened anyways. So you have to keep that in mind. But you have to keep on investing. 3 years, 2 years, 3 years down the line, a graduate, or even an MBA for that matter, that person can only remain relevant if you have that learning culture. So as an organization, because things are changing a lot faster than it used to maybe in the last decade or last couple of decades, we have to have that learning culture. We have to invest in a learning culture. I think a lot of work is also happening in the learning field, where you're trying to bring in things in a bite-sized way. Because the attention span of people is it's also reducing quite a bit. So keeping all of that in mind, any sort of certification that is relevant to your job, and like I said, there are those generic things like analytics, which you have to know. Things like presentation skills, you have to know, right? You have to be able to, like Chris was saying, read data and bring out the story from the data. It's not just about doing some Excel work of pivoting and that's about it. What's the story behind it? What are you trying to say? So those are very, very basic need for, I think, all professionals today. But apart from that, in your own field, whatever new is happening, it's important to keep on trying to do it. Like a CFA course is a tough one, but it makes you globally. Your career goes on a global level because you become worthy of that. It's tough, easier not to do, but does that enhance your skill to a level where you remain relevant for a longer period of time and you get to earn the same salary or a higher bit of salary which you're doing today? Yes, it does. Sure. So that's where those enhanced skill sets and kind of pushing yourself and stretching a little bit more comes in, and I think that's very, very important.
Absolutely, so relevant. Thank you for that. Chris, again, would love to get you in on this point. Again, in your experience, any specific certifications or qualifications that you are observing are really helping professionals get that edge in the marketplace today?
I think so. In addition to everything that we've already mentioned, two other areas I would point out is one is private markets, which is a huge part of the market and continuing to grow. And continuing to be important to firms who are seeking to press more and more into private markets just to generate the kind of returns that they need. And then the other one I would call out is private wealth management. Once you have a solid underpinning in your profession, building out into private wealth, I think, will be a theme in the upcoming several years. I see a lot of large firms not only catering to the mass affluent and the ultra wealthy, but even pressing down into smaller investors. It's just such a growing area, and an area I think will be one of a lot of opportunity for students of today.
Thank you for sharing that. Wonderful. Sonal, so we've discussed so much about, of course, reskilling, upskilling, certification programs. But if we look at the well-being of the employee holistically, or rather the professional development of the teams on a holistic basis, what is it that organizations can really do to foster that development and to ensure that the growth is happening on all fronts, not only when it comes to reskilling or upskilling?
Sure. I think organizations are already taking a lot of initiatives, and the good part is that they have realized that these initiatives, especially when you wish to grow people at a leadership level or have functional or technical leaders in the organization, they're going to revolve and have a lot of emphasis around developing the emotional quotient. Yes. That is something that organizations have lately realized, and there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of developmental interventions that they are making sure are catering to that need. Apart from this, I also feel that organizations are looking at creating opportunities where, rather than having classroom kind of an intervention, which also works very well, but on a more continuous level, they are able to provide avenues where employees are able to also have social learning, which means that they are interacting with other colleagues. Some of them can be outside their own teams, and broadening their horizons by understanding what the perspectives are. And there are various initiatives in all organizations, I believe, when they have cross-functional teams coming together, they have, projects where you might need an innovation to be done, and it always helps out. And that is, one thing that organizations have lately started off even rewarding. So those things are becoming extremely important. But I wouldn't still say that the emphasis on classroom training has gone away. A lot of initiatives that organizations take with institutes, and some of these are globally recognized institutes, where they have programs that have been specifically curated for leadership skills building. So things like those are definitely going to be the most sought after. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But a lot of curation of what the exact need is now being done by organizations. They're making sure that they have a self-service portal in which organizations can give an opportunity for employees to decide what my learning path should be. So, it's no more about prescribing that, I'm your manager, this is what I feel you need. It's also possible that you as an employee, because employees are now far more aware of themselves and what's happening in the industry, what is it that they should be doing. Yes. So it's now imperative for organizations to create that learning opportunity and the ability for employees to create that path for themselves. And that's exactly what they're doing by having all the learning interventions available, all the resources available to the employees, where they themselves decide how they want the learning journey to be driven. So that is, I think, far more also possible, because the new generation, I feel, likes to take things in their own hands, decide what they want to do. And this might not be related to the immediate role that they are playing. It is more about, in the future, where do they want to go and what will it take for them to reach there. So those things, I think, are pretty interesting.
Absolutely, really fascinating there. So the individuals or the teams are sort of co-creating that process. It's not imposed on them. Any examples, ladies, that you could share from your careers? Of course, you've been in this space. You've reached a very high level, actually, in this space, both of you. So any examples that you could share where this kind of skilling, reskilling, upskilling has been harnessed, has been really embraced by employees, and how that's perhaps catapulted them in their careers? Anything you'd like to share?
So one of the things that we as an organization, and a lot of organizations are doing for that matter, is the internal job enhancement, right? Where you get to apply for positions which might not be relevant to whatever you're doing currently, and you want to do something more, and that's where the resource or the person is also supported with certain courses which will help that person do better in the next job. A lot of that is happening, even in HR department for that matter. A lot of people from the sales or from the credit and other departments come in, and that really helps because they bring in that perspective. They have actually been talking to customers where we have never really had that opportunity. So that whole crisscrossing of skill sets and of people going into organizations, into different departments is really happening. And that of course requires some sort of enhancement of your skills, because otherwise you won't be able to perform well in that role. In the engineering field also, we see a lot of that. In my previous organization, which was basically a thermal, it was startup power, so it's a thermal power plant, coal-based power plant, electricity, all of that sort of organization. But the person who was driving the thermal power plant project was a chemical engineer. Okay. And how does that happen? That only happens when you understand that at a leadership level, it is not just about your last set of experience or your qualification that matters. If you can unlearn that, or if you can learn more and you can become something else, the table should be open to you. And that's where I think we are also evolving, because there is a dearth of skilled people. There is no dearth of resources, but there is a huge dearth of skilled resources. And that's where, as organizations also, we are understanding that unless we reskill, unless we, let these people crisscross into different roles, we are also not going to get a holistic, resource for our leadership. And this really happens a lot more in the government setup, in the government organizations, especially, for example, public sector banks like SBI. They will move you into different roles for you to enhance and go into some other role, and that's a lot of discomfort, because you've been comfortable with a certain role, and then for you to rise in the organization, you have to all of a sudden move. But the fact is, and that also happens in older organizations like a Tata Power for that matter, what happens is, by the time you are maybe about 15 years experience or 20 years experience, you have not only done client facing roles, you have done support roles like like an HR or a finance, or one of those. You have done governance roles like a risk or an audit or one of those. So your understanding of the organization is a lot more holistic than a person who has specialized into one role. And for becoming a leader, I think that's a better way to go than just take one route and go. And because there are so many opportunities available for doing that kind of learning, anybody who gets that should basically get hold of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really fascinating there. Thank you. And, Chris, again, to bring you in, we've spoken so much about the importance of really catering the learning experience, right? Customizing it to the organization's need, perhaps to the employee's needs. Where do you see the intersection of industry and academia playing a role here? Are there any specific opportunities or best strategies that organizations can really keep in mind when it comes to creating the learning experiences by intersecting the two?
Oh, the intersection. I think universities, credentials, and employers, all three play, I think, a strong role. And in the case of universities, I think there's a strong foundation of knowledge, and then the better universities have within that threaded a sort of a backbone of soft skills and critical thinking skills. In the case of a credential, we're able to teach topics much more deeply and to teach the practical application. And that just tends to be because we're more nimble as a more focused program. And then I think in the case of an employer, being able to be clear about what will make employees successful in the firm, what skills that they need to have, and engaging with universities and credentials to help bring those skills to life. And then, as you had talked about, the continuing learning aspect and help chart a course for them to keep those skills sharp over time.
And perhaps aspects as well, like research projects, internships, or on-ground hands-on experience. Surely this comes through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have begun partnering with both universities and employers a lot more deeply, just because there is less tolerance among students just for acquiring some knowledge and then trusting that they're going to have a career. They want desk ready, like I can sit down on my first day.
And also there's the aspect, of course, of research projects, internships, just really hands-on experience in the industry, right? I'm sure this also plays a role here.
Absolutely, and we're very interested in bridging those gaps and helping students get experience with hands-on application and to help guide the transition into the working world.
So I would like to add a point to what Chris mentioned here, Devina. I feel that organizations and educational institutes, they need to work far more closely than what they've been doing till now. Okay, and as much as has happened, there is a scope to do so much more. We are right now just focusing on, like you mentioned, research projects, internships, field trips, but there is a need to make sure that we have a far closer association. We are working hand in hand to, let's say, co-design the curriculum. Yes. And I have felt that a lot of universities nowadays have a curriculum which is so far off from what the industry really needs. A lot of it has not even been redesigned for the last decade or so. And things have changed so drastically in the industry that even if those graduates and students have done excellently well in academics, they might not be really fit for the industry. So there is a lot of scope to do far more in that particular direction. I recently also visited a symposium organized by one of the management institutes, and I was just amazed with the kind of projects that students had on display. And a lot of it, to tell you, ultimately led to sponsorship coming for those ideas. So I think there's a need to make sure that we are trying to give opportunities to students to become more industry ready, if that's the direction that they wish to take. So a lot of effort that I feel needs to be done.
Sonal, there's another point that we must bring to the table, because of course we've been talking about technology, the impact it has on finance professionals. Surely there's an ethical aspect to this as well, right? When we're looking at, again, the impact of data, let's say big data, the impact it has on the roles of finance professionals, as you've laid out there. What are some of the ethical considerations that professionals and organizations should look at, and how do you really stay ahead of that curve as well?
I think it's a very relevant and pertinent point right now. And all organizations, I think the entire industry is trying to make sure that there is no misuse of the data. To begin with, data itself has been provided for a specific purpose, and the guidelines around it, which are thankfully global standards, which most organizations do comply to, they are pretty clear on what is the kind of use of that particular data. However, there are various biases that do come up as we try to create a lot of AI-related tools, and they are just because of the fact that historically, whatever and for whichever purpose that data was collected, does have the inherent bias of everyone who was behind creating that data. And to give you a very specific example, one of the organizations, quite a big MNC, did realize that when they tried to implement AI into their recruitment model, there was a big gender bias that came in. Not because the model was not right, but because historically that is how the hiring did take place. That is exactly the kind of men that were hired, which is what led to that. So I think a lot of considerations will need to be put in as we create new tools around it. I, in fact, feel that, not just the element of all of these algo biases, but if you look at it more comprehensively, I feel that every single proposition now needs to be looked at from various angles. Okay, and there would be things like the legal viability, the social desirability, ecological sustenance, things where we are looking at ethical acceptability. Then I would say technical effectiveness, and lastly, and mind it, lastly, financial viability. And that is exactly what I feel organizations now need to do. They need to look at all of these aspects before they decide on how and what the entire AI related data needs to be used for. So.
Fascinating. I mean, the hierarchy of the priority points, as you said, with lastly, financial viability. Really fascinating. Amazing to hear someone from the finance background also chart it out in this manner. There's been some really strong points you brought here. Arpita, I'd love for you to also elaborate a bit on the point of the gender bias. Because, of course, when we're looking at the finance field, surely DE&I today will play a big role because it is quite a skewed background historically. How do organizations approach it today? Also, what are some of the benefits of really ensuring the diversity and inclusion is really put into place, is focused on, is considered a priority in the organization? What's in it for the organization at the end of the day as well?
I think it's very exciting, the time that we are kind of entering right now. A BFSI sector is probably one of the sectors where the gender ratio can be a lot healthier, a lot better than what it is today. One of the ways that we see it is easier to bring in gender, diversity is right at the beginning, at the base, because when it comes to students, you get to choose in a certain ratio of male and female, or the entire diversity part a lot better than what you can do for a certain role. Because for a certain role, only a certain number of people apply, and you still have to hire within that. And again, you cannot hire somebody who's less qualified than the other person. So there is just to meet the diversity numbers, right? Yes. So that part is definitely there. So at the beginning of the journey is where you can bring in a lot of diversity. But bringing in diversity is not just the thing. I always talk about this, that you have invited me to the party, but you're not dancing with me. So in a lot of cases, you just bring in diversity, you talk about it, you have done a certain percentage, but then are you being able to retain that diversity in the long run? That's where a lot of organizations today face a huge challenge. Does that only happen because the organization is not inviting enough? To a certain extent, there are also certain challenges in a country like ours, and I'm more and more realizing it's actually across the world. Say for example, the primary caregiver of a child, or even of parents for that matter, is generally a woman. Yes. And that becomes a major problem, because that becomes be it at the starting of your career, when it comes to a woman moving with a man, in case you're marrying outside of a state, and you basically give up your career and you move on. That's why we have to support. We as an organization, if you have a scope of giving that person another role in a different city, please try to give it, because it's very important. Yes. Again, when it comes to a childbirth, that's where there is a gap. You have to support. And again, it's a 6 months period. It's it's also a very kind of a period where the woman also questions what her career is going to be like after she returns. So that kind of a surety is required. In a lot of cases, an older parent, looking after an older parent, also becomes a woman's responsibility. Yes. But then I will not restrict diversity to a woman, because I think be it my organization, be it all the organizations which are evolved enough, we do consider diversity as a whole. LGBTQ is definitely a big part of it. And we are definitely working a lot on bringing on kind of a normalcy around it. While we do bring on normalcy, we also have to understand that there is a lot of support we also have to provide the community with. A lot of people have not got the right set of education. Do you just bring them and make them sit beside somebody who's already qualified and then ask them to perform and say, hey, look, I've given you the job, you better perform now? Probably not. You also have to give them that support so that they come up the curve. So I think that's where bringing in is where we are not doing all that bad as an industry. As any industry for that matter, the awareness is there that the percentage needs to increase. But keeping them and really helping them make a career, are we doing a lot of work on that? That's where the short-term ROI comes into your mind and you don't work on it. but in the long run, it has a lot of ROI, and that's what we need to
Absolutely.
understand.
Absolutely. Some excellent food for thought there on this point. Absolutely. Thank you all, first of all, for so many very candid experiences, insights that you've shared. And we've really covered a lot of nuances and the intricacies of the modern finance world as we see it today. Chris, maybe you can help us sort of bring this all together now as we come to a close of the conversation. Also, in perspective of what does CFA Institute really do to help the finance professional, again, keep in mind all these various factors we've discussed, prepare them for the modern finance world, be it in curricula, in training, but also in real and hands-on experience of the industry. So how does CFA Institute step in here to make it all happen?
I think historically we did a great job identifying what it is people need to know to be successful in the industry. And I think where we became aware that we were falling short, it gets to the practical application. And so we've invested quite a bit over the past couple of years to make sure that the program is skills-based and that the things that we are teaching are readily applicable on the job. And so a big part of that is trying to partner with employers to understand, not just to be able to teach generative AI, but to be able to teach it the way that it's used in the investment industry. And the same holds for any tool that people are using.
Really practical, hands-on experience out there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap, if you could help by leaving our viewers today with one key takeaway. I know that's quite a tough ask given the vast nature of the subject we're talking about, but one key takeaway really when it comes to bridging the talent gap in the finance space that all the professionals out there can keep in mind. Sonal? Let me start with you.
Self-initiative to me
nice.
is extremely important. I don't think professionals now need to wait for someone to come or organizations to do something to upskill or reskill them.
Yes.
I feel the onus now needs to be shifted, and employees are doing that to a large extent. There's definitely a need to do more in that particular direction.
Yes.
So make sure that you are keeping yourself abreast with what's happening in the industry, and taking the initiative to yourself come up the curve.
Yes.
A lot of resources are now available. Like, for example, the CFA Institute has come up with a new program on green investments. GARP has come up with the risk and artificial intelligence. So there is no shortage of opportunities that are out there where employees or professionals can themselves go and make sure that they are fine-tuning what they currently do and adding on to it. So take the initiative and go for it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Arpita?
So like Chris was mentioning, sustainability is a big thing. Ethics is a big thing. Governance and ethics. Cybersecurity is a big thing. These are also roles where you won't have your cousin or your or your uncle or anybody already gone into, which means it's a new role, but the scope is huge. So apart from just getting into engineering and then getting into AI, and that's about it, the end of the world, because that's what is big. It's also very important for us to understand these interesting industrial needs that are coming up and work on those, because the rarer your skill set is, the more valued you are in an organization. But of course, you have to understand the trends, and like Sonal was saying, learn. There is no ending to learning, and especially with an evolving, world, it's very important that you understand the importance of keeping yourself a little ahead of the, giving you that edge over the others. So just keep on learning something that's very kind of relevant, but that's interesting to you, so that you can sustain in the long run. If you want to pursue something like that, I think that's about it.
Nice. Try to find that USP there.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Chris?
Completely agree with that. Finance is an industry where you can have a wonderful career. It takes a bit of work to get that career launched and to get it to stand out in that industry. And it's very important that you not just coast once you get in the industry, and that you're always investing within yourself. And then the other point we haven't talked a lot about yet, but it's not just investing with yourself, but also engaging heavily in getting involved in mentorship programs and continuing education programs, and keeping yourself sharp in that way as well.
Yep. By giving back too, that's learning as well.
Yeah.
Yes, all right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here, all of you, for being here on ET Studios and really sharing your perspectives from the India perspective, the global perspective on what it means to bridge the talent gap in the finance sector. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. All right, on that note, that's all we have for you in this very special episode. As India's financial ecosystem evolves, it's clear that bridging the talent gap requires a combination of technical expertise, global certifications, and essential soft skill development. Collaboration between industry and academia will be key in shaping the future-ready workforce. So thank you for joining us on a journey towards building a competitive and resilient financial talent pool. Stay tuned for more conversations that drive growth and innovation. Until next time, many thanks for watching.